Well, I see you're back for another dose of classification. In this session, we will once again go out on that great ocean of knowledge and continue on with the general rules of interpretation. So if you have your life vest on, here we go. Remember from our last session that if we could not classify our product using General Rule 1, then we would continue on and use General Rule 2. General Rule 2 is to be used when you cannot classify your product using the headings, subheadings, and section and chapter notes. Take, for example, unfinished or unassembled goods. There is no heading in the harmonized tariff system for unfinished or unassembled goods. At the end of the last session, we used as an example an automobile without seats and unassembled clock movements. General Rule 2b covers articles that contain more than one classifiable product, such as coffee with chicory or milk with vitamin D. If we have an unfinished automobile, for example, an automobile with a 1200cc engine imported without seats, and you could see that automobile in a parking lot, you really could not tell whether it had seats or not. For all intents and purposes, it would look like a complete automobile. We cannot classify it using headings and legal notes, as there is no heading for an incomplete automobile. Therefore, we must apply General Rule 2a, which requires the application of a concept known as essential character. The official description for essential character is, and I quote, "the chief attribute which strongly marks or serves to distinguish what an article is. In general, no specific character, weight, value, quantity, bulk, etc. is suffice to identify a product." The terms are quite vague, but trust me, customs knows it when it sees it, and any questions that appear on the exam will be very obvious. I like to define essential character as, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, then it must be a duck. So let's talk about unfinished goods. Unfinished or incomplete goods are products that are imported into the United States that are not suitable for use in their imported condition. Something else must be done to them or added to them to make them usable. Driving a car without seats is quite difficult. The car would need to be finished in order for it to be serviceable. Keep in mind that raw material such as steel, plates, or aluminum tubing would have no essential character. You cannot import aluminum tubes and say that it is an unfinished bicycle frame. Also, you have to have enough of the article to identify it with essential character. For example, if I'm going to import handlebars for bicycles, I could not declare them as bicycles, as it is a part, not an unfinished bicycle. Now, if I add more parts, it becomes an unfinished or unassembled bicycle. While we are on the subject, parts do not take precedence over General Rule 1. The part has its own provision in the tariff, then that provision has to be used when importing the part. You cannot call it parts of, you have to use the correct heading. For example, if you are bringing in capacitors and resistors to repair a piece of electronic equipment, you would have to classify them as capacitors and resistors. If you are bringing in a part that could only be used for the machine you are fixing, then you could classify it as parts of. Now let's talk about unassembled goods. The unassembled goods we are speaking of require only simple assembly, with fixing devices such as screws, nuts, bolts, wing nuts, this type of thing. There cannot be any kind of manufacturing process required or involved. Think of bicycles, wagons, dollhouses, and other items that require some assembly on Christmas Eve after one too many eggnogs. There is a concept known as the rules of entireties. This rule states that if all the parts necessary to complete the assembly of a product are in one shipment, then the classification can be that which would be used for the end product. The bits and pieces could be packed in separate cartons, but as long as they are in one shipment, then the rule applies. This could apply to a shipment of bicycles or perhaps a shipment of camera bodies with separate lenses. This brings us to different mixtures and combinations. What happens if I have milk containing vitamin D? The milk is classified in 0401 under milk and creams, and the vitamin D would be found in 2936, provitamins and vitamins. Where would we classify the milk? How about coffee that is mixed with chicory? Very popular in the Gulf Coast states, especially southern Louisiana. The coffee is found under 0901, and chicory would be found under 2101, extracts and essences. Once again, we find a product that contains two items from two different headings. As these are neither unfinished nor unassembled, we cannot use Rule 2A. We must move on to Rule 2B. General Rule 2B tells us that mixtures and combinations of articles of different materials, which are described in two different headings, such as the coffee and chicory or milk and vitamins, are to be classified under General Rule 3 using the essential character. Remember that if there is a conflict between General Rule 2B and the headings and notes, that headings and notes must prevail. For example, if we are classifying lard oil mixed with other substances and we go to heading 1503, we will only find lard oil. We will have to use General Rule 2B to classify lard oil mixed with other substances because 1503 requires the oil to be unmixed. On the other hand, if we had a mixture of odoriferous substances to classify, you would not need to use 2B, as heading 3302 covers mixtures of those substances. So the heading itself covers those kind of mixtures. This brings us to the end of Part 2 and General Rule 2. It is back in the water for us. Don't forget to hold on, or not.